Hey all, today we're going to talk about how to write for AP Gov FRQs 1, 2, and 3. So 1, 2, and 3 are going to cover concept application, quantitative analysis, and the SCOTUS comparison. In concept application, you're going to get some kind of scenario, and then you're going to get tasks telling you what to respond to. So in this instance, it says the Alliance Defending Freedom, a conservative Christian interest group, has promoted an annual event known as Pulpit Freedom Sunday. On this occasion, pastors are encouraged to challenge a provision of the tax law known as the Johnson Amendment, which prohibits political activity by religious groups. The Johnson Amendment prohibits them from contributing money to political campaigns or speaking out in favor or against political candidates. On Pulpit Freedom Sunday, as an act of civil disobedience, pastors and religious leaders preach openly about the moral qualifications of candidates seeking office. Note that I've underlined the part about speaking out because that's the part this group is really concerned with. You're going to get multiple tasks. In this case, we're just going to look at 2, but we use the same process for all of them. So A says, describe an action Congress could take to address the concerns of the interest group in the scenario. And B says, in the context of the scenario, explain how partisan divisions could prevent the action described in Part A. So your answer in B needs to respond to the issue in Part A. We're going to use something called DUE format, or DO. And I like to think of the idea that you are due for a good grade. You're going to use exactly 3 sentences for each task or for each part of the FRQ. DUE stands for D, direct answer. You give a clear and basic answer in 1 sentence. You follow that up with using an example, 1 sentence again, and then your last sentence, you explain or expand. You give some details on how your example would affect the scenario. So again, in Part A, it says describe an action Congress could take to address concerns of the interest group in the scenario. So our first sentence, the direct answer is going to be Congress could address the concerns of the Alliance Defending Freedom by passing a bill that changes the Johnson Amendment. Now notice that I've actually reflected the prompt. I use the exact words they use in the task so that the scorer and you are sure that you are actually answering what they want. Sentence 2, give an example. So we use the phrase, for example. For example, Congress could make an exception to the law, allowing religious leaders the right to speak out against candidates for office. Sentence 3, we explain or expand on that. This would allow for greater freedom of speech and involvement in politics for pastors, but still limit the ability to contribute money. Now, it's important that when you explain, you actually talk about how your example affects the issue that is in this scenario. Our second task, B, says in the context of the scenario, explain how partisan divisions could prevent the action described in Part A. So here's our DUE all put together. Partisan divisions could prevent Congress from passing changes to the Johnson Amendment because passing a law requires both Congress and the president agreeing to the bill. For example, if the majority of Congress is Democrat and the president is Republican, the president may veto the law. In that case, Congress would need enough votes to override the veto or the bill would fail. So there's your whole DUE process all put together. Now, there's one time you don't want to use DUE, and that's when the task is identify. So in this example, identify the constitutional provision that empowers Congress to regulate pollution in a state. Since it's such a simple task, you really only need 1 sentence. There's no point in wasting your time writing it all out in some complex 3-sentence formula. We're simply going to say the constitutional provision that empowers Congress to regulate pollution in a state is the Interstate Commerce Clause. And again, note that I'm reflecting the prompt. Well, that's how you're going to get all your points in FRQs 1, 2, and 3. This is AP Gov Buddy. Crush that test.